Game Week 10 wildcard has proven to be a popular strategy for FPL managers that still have the chip available, and in today's video I'll be revealing my current Game Week 10 wildcard draft, of course discussing why I'm going without Erling Haaland, the teams to target, and even if you're not on a wildcard, it's super important to know what direction these teams are going. So as always, look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like and of course smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, I think it's always really important when you're wildcarding to focus on those fixtures. And we also have the debate today on whether to wildcard in Game Week 10 or in Game Week 12. I want to show you why I think Game Week 10 does have some upside that Game Week 12 just doesn't really allow you. So we have the fixture ticker here, obviously top of the tree being Wolves, at the bottom here being Man City. I have sifted out a couple of teams that I just think have no FPL relevance, so I do apologise to any fans out there that do support the likes of Southampton, for example. So take a look at the fixtures right now. Wolves long term, whether you wildcard in 10 or 12, remain great. Everton, if you want to back them. Now, the first team that I really want to address is going to be Man United, because we are in a position right now where Man United were completely off the table. With Ten Hag sacking, you can read into that what you will. Man United continue to be terrible, or they have a new manager bounce under the interim manager Van Nistelrooy before they most likely appoint Amaron in the foreseeable future. With these fixtures coming up, Chelsea at home, Leicester at home, Ipswich away and Everton at home, it feels like a real great opportunity for those managers that are happy to take the risk to go early on some of those Man United attackers. I'm looking at the likes of Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes. Now, of course, you might be a manager that thinks to themselves, I'm not touching Man United, and maybe that does play into the hands of a Game Week 12 wildcarder, because you'll have 2 game weeks under your belt to assess what is going on with this Man United team, who are the players to target. And then if there is actually any true value in that team, bring him in for the Ipswich away game. But I still think there's value in doing it in Game Week 10. So Man United players are a great benefit if you do view that as a benefit. Spurs as well, a perfect example of a team that are not on anybody's radar right now off the back of Game Week 9. But for me, whenever Spurs are at home, I always fancy them for goals. And Aston Villa and Ipswich for me, I think there are goals in both of these games. Even in Game Week 13 if you could hold off till then. But Fulham have proved to be a tough cookie at times for some of the top teams. So I think for 2 game weeks where managers are moving away from Spurs, could be a great entry point and a bit of a placeholder for another premium asset, which I will discuss later on in this video. So Spurs bring the upside. Outside of that, I also think Liverpool brings some upside. I'm seeing managers talk about wildcarding in Game Week 12. Well, are you actually going to wildcard Mo Salah in for Game Week 12 away against Southampton to then most likely sell him straight away with City and Newcastle and even Everton away following that? I really think the upside is in the next 3 game weeks with Brighton, Villa and Southampton. I can see a lot of goals in all 3 of those games. And then you can actually use Game Week 13 as an opportunity to move away from those premium assets in that Liverpool team, like a Mo Salah, going out to someone like a Bukayo Saka, for example, who kickstarts a good run away against West Ham. So I think Game Week 10, all in all, actually possesses some real upside that some managers aren't really considering. Now, of course, there's always going to be risks. You are probably going to be going without a certain Erling Haaland. But I've seen a lot of people talk about actually going without Erling Haaland in Game Week 12. And I look at that and think, I'd actually rather sell Erling Haaland away against Bournemouth in a Game Week 10 wildcard than Erling Haaland at home against Spurs, who are defensively a very, very tricky team to predict. And I think Man City could score goals in that game. So I actually think I'd rather take on Erling Haaland from Game Week 10 to Game Week 13 or maybe even Game Week 14 and then look to bring a strategy in place where I get him in for Game Week 15 onwards. Loads of people talking about how can you go without Erling Haaland? We're going to talk about that in the next section, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I also think going without Arsenal for the next 2 is still a fine strategy, but then I think you need him in place from Game Weeks 12 or 13 onwards. So of course, probably the biggest question going into Game Week 10 is, do you sell Erling Haaland? Well, the purpose of today's video is looking at a Game Week 10 wildcard. So I can't really answer this question if you're sat there with free transfers, no wildcard available, because that is a completely different subject. But if you're in a position right now where you are looking to wildcard in Game Week 10, I think you have to sell Erling Haaland. I'm going to be honest with you. I think if you're wildcarding in game week 10, you got to ask the question, why are you actually doing it? One, is your team just in a terrible position and you're trying to make amends? Then that could be the difference there. But for me, if you're wildcarding in game week 10, you're trying to be incredibly aggressive with those upcoming fixtures. I'm talking about Spurs, I'm talking about Man United, I'm talking about Liverpool. I'm not talking about Man City over that period. Now, if Erling Haaland was a reasonable price, 10 million, then it's a no-brainer. But 15 million, trying to keep that in your team while trying to accommodate these premiums in these top teams with good fixtures, is just an impossible task. And that's why I really think you need to ask yourself, if you're going to wildcard in game week 10, why are you doing it? For me, it's all about going against Erling Haaland for maybe 5 game weeks before having a strategy in place to bring him back in for game week 15. And when we just compare the two of them, Salah versus Erling Haaland, over the next, let's say 3 game weeks, because I think Mo Salah then becomes a bit of a cash cow around game week 13, and I'll obviously show you how I'm going to do it in my future part of the video. But for the next 3, Brighton at home, everybody's telling me that game week 11 for Haaland is the money fixture away against Brighton, but Liverpool also have that fixture, so I don't think the argument is actually in place there. Then game week 11 at home against Aston Villa. Once again, I think that is a good fixture. I think Villa's team is good, but I think they have been getting a little bit lucky at times in the Premier League with some of their results. And I do think Liverpool might actually have quite a comfortable victory against them in that game. And then Southampton away. Now, I actually think that's quite a close one. I think Spurs at home is the one that I'd actually fear the most as a non-Erling Haaland owner. But let's be real. Southampton away, I still think is the fixture to have in game week 12. And we look at the next 5 game weeks for Erling Haaland, and how many of them do I actually feel confident about captaining? I'd rather have Mo Salah in both game weeks 10, 11 and 12 as my captain. And if we chuck into the mix someone like a Son, who you will probably have in your team on a wild card for game week 11 at home against Ipswich, he's better than both of these. Then you put into the mix someone like a Cole Palmer that you can also captain in game weeks 12. I think there isn't many times that you're actually going to captain Erling Haaland. Then it's the case of, are you actually scared to not have this 15.4 million man? Previously, when everybody was perma-captaining, it was a scary prospect because your captain basically had to deliver. But if other managers are going against Erling Haaland, I think this is a time to do it with real aggression in a game week 10 wildcard. So for that reason, I do think if you're wildcarding, you go with that Erling Haaland, you jump on Mo Salah for 3, and then you look to pivot your team later down the line. So if I was wildcarding in game week 10, personally, this is how my team would look. Now, I need to put the caveat out there that my team value is probably the worst in the history of FPL. So if I can afford this team, you absolutely can afford this team. But after this part, I do want to show you a few variations that you can do with this draft, because I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of this. But just going through top to bottom right now, I think in terms of the goalkeeper department, there's not actually a goalkeeper this season that has put his hand up as the #1 FPL pick. In years gone by, we've had people like Emi Martinez, we've had Pickford at crazy prices. I don't think there is one. I think you could make the argument to go for a premium like a Raya, but while we don't know the certainty and the severity of this Gabriel injury, I can't really sit here being confident as an Arsenal defensive owner. So for that reason, I think freeing up the funds, going to someone like a Sells, who is in a very good defence right now in Nottingham Forest, with good fixtures on the horizon at times, is the route to go for with my team being low in team value. Then having Fabianski at 4 million. Yes, I'm not expecting him to play every week, but he did come back into that West Ham team in game week 9. They did win, so I would be surprised if Lopetegui was to change up the team off the back of a victory. So for that reason, Fabianski is the absolute standout 4 million goalkeeper. And if you get lucky, you might be able to rotate them at times when Nottingham Forest do have a tricky game where they do play away against Arsenal and Man City in the foreseeable future. I would prefer Fabianski's fixtures in both of those. Now, moving into defenders, you can see an absence here of a premium defender. And again, if you're in a position where you have good team value, I would upgrade Konate to someone like a Trent in a heartbeat. But right now, I just don't have that luxury available. So I do think going for a cheaper defence is a viable strategy. I'm looking at Arsenal right now, and I don't actually think they are essential to own until maybe around game week 13. And even then, we need to get an update on Calafiori on the likes of Gabriel's injury before actually touching that defence from my perspective, especially with Newcastle and Chelsea away in the next 2. So I think Konate is actually a good option. Gets you a piece like Liverpool defence, who have 2 home games and then Southampton away. And also, he's just expensive enough that if we need to pivot him to an Arsenal defender, we don't actually need to free up too many more funds to do so. So I think Konate is good, but of course I prefer Trent if you have the team value. Now outside of that, I've got Rico Lewis that's accumulated some value, so I'm going to keep him in the team, and while Kyle Walker's injured, I actually still think Lewis is a great pick. But of course, the players alongside that are quite budget. We got Aït-Nouri that I do think is pretty much essential for wildcard teams, but you need to remember, he is also on 4 yellow cards, 1 away from a suspension, so you need to keep that in mind. But I think if you have a strong enough squad in depth, you can just roll with that suspension if it does happen. Then we've got Anderson at 4.3 million. Again, I do prefer Robinson if you have got the funds available, but I think Anderson at 4.3 million, returning from a suspension, is a good pickup with those Fulham games that they do have at home. And finally, Vandenberg, 4 million, the standout pick, getting guaranteed minutes in this Brentford team, absolutely fine in your squads. Now, moving into the midfield, of course, this is where the real money has been invested. You can see I have gone for Mo Salah, Cole Palmer, Son, and Bruno Fernandes is basically the premiums in this team. And again, I will show you some variations later on where you can slightly change this, because I know there are a few people looking at these forwards thinking that is some cheap forwards there. So for me, I think if you're wildcarding, I've spoken about it, I think Mo Salah is absolutely essential. You're not going to go without Cole Palmer and Mbeumo. Those 3 I think are just absolutely locked in your teams. But I think Son and Bruno are the ones that are slightly up for debate. Now, Spurs off the back of game week 9, I get it if people are having their hesitations. Son wasn't even in the squad, so we do need to get an update on his injury. But with those 2 fixtures that they have, Villa at home and then Ipswich at home in game week 11, that is a phenomenal opportunity for captaincy for someone like Son. And I really do feel like if you have the budget available, going for Son for maybe 2 game weeks is actually a really aggressive move, but I really do like it. Now, of course, you could play safe and you change Son to Bukayo Saka and you've got a player there for the long term. But as I've spoken about, captaincy is really important, and having Son available for game week 11 at home against Ipswich could be a massive swing. So depends what kind of route you wanted to go down, but if you want to go Saka, that is absolutely fine as a slightly more safer route. And of course, talking about aggression, Bruno Fernandes in the team, 8.2 million. This is all about a heart pick over a head pick, because Ten Hag being sacked, I've just got this assumption that there is going to be a new manager bounce and Bruno Fernandes is going to be the heart of everything good. But let's be real, that is a luxury pick. If you want to go down, you could go to Garnacho if you really want to go to Man United, but not invest too much money in that team. But there are plenty of options available, but Bruno just feels as a gut pick the right time to bring him in. Now, in terms of the forwards, we don't need to talk about Erling Haaland. We discussed that already. If you're wildcarding in a game week 10, I do think you need to be aggressive with it. But we've gone for 3 cheap forwards, and I think these offer both pros and massive negatives. So Wood right now, he is yellow flagged, but if we get an update that he's fine, I still think he's a brilliant option for your teams. Game weeks 10, 11 and 13 are fantastic. Cunha, I think, is the forward to get long term, 6.5 million. I can only see his price increasing as we progress, especially when managers wildcarding in game week 12, and he's brilliant on the bonus points. So if he scores, he's basically in the money. And lastly, we got Raul Jimenez. Now, this one's up for debate. You could easily change this to someone like a Johan Visser at Brentford. But I think Raul Jimenez is actually a really nice pick at 5.7 million because he doesn't give you as much of a benching headache. Now, on one hand, that's great because you just keep him on your bench. If he scores, it's fine. But also, the reason why I like it is because then you're not sitting there thinking, I have to bring him onto the field. So for me, Raul Jimenez is a great pick, guaranteed minutes, maybe on penalties, and he really does rotate well with the team when someone like a Chris Wood has a terrible fixture. So that's how the wildcard team's looking. I get it. There's lots of things that are good and bad. Having no Erling Haaland is obviously a massive risk, but I still think there is value to be had. So let me show you how this team would look in future game weeks and show you how you'd get Erling Haaland back in before finally showing you some variations on this team. So here's how the team would look for game week 10 in terms of an actual selection. I think the 11 looks really, really good. 0.2 million in the bank is a problem. You could probably build this team and have 2 million in the bank, but it is what it is. I wasn't aggressive enough in the opening game weeks, but you can see here that starting 11 looks fantastic. And with the captaincy on Mo Salah, I really do think he is a brilliant option for the future weeks. Now, coming into game week 11, I think it's really important whenever you wildcard not to be making a transfer the week after unless there really is a problem with your team where an injury does arise. Now, if we're in a position right now, firstly with the goalkeepers, where Fabianski retains his spot, you could even argue maybe starting Fabianski over Sells, but I do back the Nottingham Forest defence a bit more than that of West Ham's. And as you can see here, once again, the team looks really, really strong. We will put the captaincy on Son, and I'll put the vice-captaincy on Mo Salah, because that is the only reason why Son really is in this team. Bruno Fernandes, if he does hit the ground running, Leicester at home, I think everybody's going to be clambering to get him in. He looks great. And then the rest of the team kind of picks itself. As I spoke about, Raul Jimenez rotates really well with someone like Chris Wood at this time. And it's worth noting, if Aït-Nouri was to be in a position where he did get suspended for game week 11, Van den Berg could easily come in for him. So we have to roll the transfer in game week 11. Now, coming into game week 12, I see a lot of people talk to me saying, Nacho, how are you going to get these Arsenal assets in? Well, firstly, I don't even think bringing in Arsenal for game week 12 is essential, because as I spoke about, I do rate this Nottingham Forest defence, but to give in to peer pressure, I will show you how we get around this. So as you can see in the top right, we've got like the transfers, what you'd make. This week, we would make Son to Saka. I think Son has had his dues for the first two, then we get rid of him. Send him out and bring in Bukayo Saka, who hopefully will retain his price over that period, and we might even get a price rise from someone like Son. And again, take a look at this team for game week 12. Raul Jimenez rotates really well with Chris Wood. We bench him, start Raul Jimenez, and the rest of the team, I think, looks absolutely fantastic. If we look at game week 12 in isolation, the only thing we're really missing is Aston Villa, but again, very difficult to get someone like a Watkins. Rodgers could easily be in this wildcard team if we really deemed it real, but I think we need to spend the money on the midfield. After that, Chelsea outside of Parma, we could get to someone like a Nicholas Jackson, but again, is it essential? I don't think so. So I think we've covered ourselves pretty well in terms of the fixtures, and this is of course the week where Haaland plays Spurs. So coming into game week 13, again, I don't think this team necessarily needs a transfer, but you can make one if you want to. Again, we are trying to look really far in the future, but again, team looks really strong. Captaincy could be on anybody in this week, maybe a Cole Palmer if you really want to go there. But I think the team looks strong, and you could make the argument to roll the transfer. And because I would want to bring Erling Haaland back in, I think you would just have to grin and bear Mo Salah for that fixture and roll the transfer for 3 in game week 14. And this is where we would make the mass changes. If people are wondering how you get to Erling Haaland, you do something like this. You would do... Sorry, I just need to change the formation here because it's gone a bit weird. Anyway, the team's gone a bit weird. But as you can see, what we would do is Chris Wood to Erling Haaland. That would be the first move. We would then do Mo Salah to someone like a Rodgers. And then we would downgrade Bruno Fernandes to Kudus. I don't know where my other defender's gone. Just ignore that. But basically, you would start to pivot this team. You start to have an Erling Haaland team, and you look to have 2 premiums in the shape of Palmer and Saka alongside mid-priced to budget midfielders, like everybody basically has to afford. And I really do think with this team, you get the best of both worlds. You'd be really aggressive with those premiums in the opening few games of your wildcard, and then you pivot to the team that everybody's going to own from game week 14 onwards, and you have Erling Haaland most likely for the long term with these great fixtures where I just don't think you can have not Erling Haaland in your team. So that's how I would navigate those game weeks in particular. Coming back to game week 10, just as an idea of how you could change this if you wanted to, because I see a lot of people maybe say the forwards are a problem. One thing that you easily could do if you don't have the money available is take out Bruno Fernandes, go to someone like a Garnacho if you're still really aggressive on Man United. And then all you really have to do is take out someone like a Raul Jimenez if you think he is the sacrificial lamb in this situation. And I think you can get pretty much anybody at this price point. Yes, you can't get Havertz or Watkins, but I think it's very difficult to really justify Watkins right now with these cheap enablers. So you could, if you felt like Nicholas Jackson was a great long-term pick, just bring him in here and swap in this situation. I really don't think people need to panic too much. The real sacrifice that my team can't do is Trent, and that is because my budget and team value is so damn bad. But you might be in a position where you actually can do it, and then I think the wildcard in 10 is really, really on the cards. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 10 wildcard draft video. As I've spoken about, I haven't activated it yet, but I am planning on doing so, and I think it does really work well with my team. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, because I know it is quite a divisive subject right now. And of course, if you have any general FPL questions, please pop them in the comments. Have a great day. Make sure you drop a like, smash the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.